Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Sofia Smallstorm returns to the show. Sofia and I will discuss a recent expose by Richard Hall regarding Julian Assange. Richard's four-part video was entitled WikiLeaks, made by the NSA. The presentation explores Assange's background and whether WikiLeaks is a force for good or simply another psyop in the toolbox of the controllers. Sofia also offers her insights into what is referred to as intelligence augmentation, which is not the same as artificial intelligence. Augmented intelligence is technology intended to enhance the minds of the ruling class and not the working class. And so without further ado, here's the conversation with Sofia. Well, Sofia, welcome back to the show. We have a really good discussion scheduled, tabled, I should say, for today, and it's going to be based upon your July newsletter, July 2017. And we're going to get into Julian Assange a little bit and WikiLeaks based upon an expose that Richard Hall and Andrew Johnson did on Richard's YouTube channel, Rich Planet TV, which I know you watched and I watched. In fact, I posted it up on my blog. I think you may have done the same thing on your blog. It was a very, very interesting set of revelations that both Richard and Andrew were rolling out, because what it says is that even those that are viewed as pursuing truth and justice and all that, these people are as fabricated as everything else that's all around us. So we'll get into that and talk about that a little bit. And also the second part of this is to talk about the difference between artificial intelligence and intelligence augmentation. And I thought that was an excellent piece of your newsletter, because when I read through it, it started to come together for me, because we keep talking in terms of artificial intelligence. When you'll talk to us more about the augmentation of intelligence, that's a completely different ball of wax. It's not the same thing. And so I think the audience is really going to enjoy this show and what it is that we're going to cover here. So with that, Sofia, what about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks? What did you find out?
Well, Mike, I didn't even know what wiki meant, because, Wikipedia, WikiLeaks, and I thought, what does this wiki even mean? So I started researching it, and I found out it means fast or quick, and that it's a Hawaiian word. So when they use it twice, it means hurry, hurry. And apparently there was a shuttle bus at the Honolulu airport that really birthed this wiki in an international sense, because a computer, I don't know what he was some kind of computer person, Howard Cunningham, 1995, he was visiting Honolulu, and an airport personnel individual told him to get on the WikiWiki bus, which would take him to the next terminal. So he found out that WikiWiki means very quick. So this was the name of the shuttle. And when he created his new web platform, it was a collaborative software that was called WikiWiki Web. So today, the noun wiki describes a website that lets people add or delete or change content using the web browser. Wiki is what they call a loan word, meaning a word that's borrowed by English, the way we have borrowed aloha, rendezvous, even the Sanskrit, Hindi, namaste, But anyway, so this word wiki has become instant in terms of a source or a place where you can put information or find information. So we have Wikipedia, that's like the instant encyclopedia. And WikiLeaks would translate to instant leaks. And what one lawyer said of WikiLeaks was, this was the First Amendment lawyer. He's the lawyer, Floyd Abrams. He said, WikiLeaks is a journalistic entity that just releases information without even reading it. And no real journalist would do that. Now, reading it or thinking about it those are two very different things. We get a lot of quote unquote journalism that journalists haven't thought about very deeply. They're just parroting it from another source like AP News. But the fact that in the world of WikiLeaks, it's not even read. It's such a massive dump. Like, thousands and thousands and thousands of emails or thousands and thousands of documents, pictures even. So I found this very interesting, that Julian Assange was the creator of this WikiLeaks. And when Richard Hall and Andrew Johnson, when they had their long discussion and they had done so much delving into Julian Assange, I was just shocked.
The same impression I had, Sophia. It's one of those things, no matter how long you've been doing this type of work in the alternative research or the truth community, there are still stones that you haven't turned over. And there's still things that you really haven't vetted and taken a close look at. And one of those things for me was WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. So I had this perception that WikiLeaks was a good thing because WikiLeaks was taking documents and putting them out for public consumption, and under the guise that it's exposing corruption and those types of things. So you would think, okay, well, what's so bad about that? The government's trying to hide stuff, and these guys are trying to put it out there, put some daylight on it so people can see what's really going on. And the interesting thing is there are documents that come out of WikiLeaks that are revelations, at least they're revelations to us and other people that are looking at it. But the question becomes, are they revelations because WikiLeaks and Julian Assange are really interested in divulging the truth? Or are they doing it because it's part of an overall PSYOP agenda, however you want to phrase it? In other words, it's not sincere or genuine as to why the information is being released. There is a rhyme and reason as to why they're doing what they're doing. So that's when I watched the show that Richard and Andrew did. That's what took me. I had to take a step back and say, well, I've been kind of following this guy and listening to him and reading the documents, the ones that that made it out where you can read them. But I was doing so without knowing really anything about him. And what became interesting during that expose that Richard and Andrew did was they got into his background. And as they dug in, you started to realize, at least I started to realize, I know you did also, that, we probably should question a few things here. I mean, that was my takeaway from it.
If we even know those things, Mike, and if you don't know something, how can you question it? You just question your sense, and I always had a sense of like, what is WikiLeaks? Where did it come from? How did this suddenly appear on the map? Because I hadn't really even given it much thought, maybe not even heard about it a whole lot before the Podesta thing, right?
Yeah.
Podesta email dump. But I just want to read from Wikipedia some information about WikiLeaks. Now, WikiLeaks and Wikipedia are supposedly not affiliated, but if you go high enough up on the pyramid, I would bet you anything they are. Okay? So, this is what Wikipedia says about WikiLeaks. Another of the organization's goals is to ensure that journalists and whistleblowers are not prosecuted for emailing sensitive information or classified documents. The online Dropbox is described by the WikiLeaks website as an innovative, secure, and anonymous way for sources to leak information to WikiLeaks journalists. In the United States, the leaking of some documents may be legally protected. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the Constitution guarantees anonymity, at least in the context of political discourse. Author and journalist Whitley Strieber has spoken about the benefits of the WikiLeaks project, noting that, quote, leaking a government document can mean jail, but jail sentences for this can be fairly short.
The thing is, how did Julian Assange's and WikiLeaks' entire apparatus come into play? They have secured servers, they're operating over here, they're protected by this country's laws and so on. But how did all of this come together? It calls into question, again, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Who was he working with? Who was he backed by? How did all of this come together? The whole thing is at a point where we really have to question everything.
Mike, this is where I use the term artificial intelligence for what we get from WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks, I'm not talking about artificial intelligence in the conventional sense. I'm talking about it's intel that's given to us purposely, right?
Right.
So the dump of this, enormous quantity of information that they then put out there so that all the conspiracy theorists can jump into this huge heap and scramble around and get these little pieces and those little pieces and make YouTubes and argue with each other. This is what it's about. So WikiLeaks in the beginning was hosted by this Swedish company, PRQ, which provided highly secure, no questions asked hosting services. And then there were a bunch of cyber attacks on it, and it switched to Amazon servers. Amazon. Like, could you go and get on Amazon servers? Or could I? No. I guess you have to know Jeff Bezos for that, right? And then it got booted off because it didn't follow Amazon's terms of service, which calls for owning or controlling all of the rights to the posted content, and that the content doesn't cause injury to any person or entity. Now it's back in Sweden and other countries. It's mainly hosted by Bahnhof, Bahnhof, in a former nuclear bunker. Wait a minute. Could you or I get that?
Nope.
No. Right. So Assange says that the location choices are specifically because those nations offer legal protection to the disclosures made on the site. And the Swedish Constitution in particular gives information providers total legal protection. So these laws make it difficult for authorities to eliminate WikiLeaks. And it's also termed they've got bulletproof hosting. So, Assange was a computer programmer by trade, we're told, but in his teens, he became an agile hacker. And he was criminally charged for hacking when he was in his early 20s because he had been doing it for years. And he was then pardoned. He did not have to pay these dreadful penalties and fines because apparently he didn't have sincerely evil intent.
Right. It wasn't malintent.
Malintent, right. So they just took pity on him and they said, okay, let's just pardon the guy, let's not be too hard on him. So he was charged 2,100 Australian dollars. He paid a few penalties, but here's the quote. He was released on a good behavior bond, avoiding a heavier penalty resulting from the perceived absence of malicious and mercenary intent and his disrupted childhood. So now we have to get into his childhood. Are you ready?
Yeah, no, I'm ready. This is going to be the good part.
Okay, so I was doing research last year on the children of God. And this was because we had the sudden, abrupt news that the very popular Zen Gardner internet personality had spent quite a bit of time with this cult called the Children of God. So, of course, people started looking into Children of God. And I did a lot of very deep looking into Children of God. I wrote a newsletter about the Children of God as well. I found that the Children of God, which is scattered worldwide, had been raided. And it had been raided worldwide, not in every commune, but in a lot of them. And one of them was in Australia. So the Australian Children of God is also known as the family. They switched their names. They've gone through a number of names because they've gotten very bad press for these abuse of children, which includes pedophilia and physical abuse, mind control, conditions and situations of extreme deprivation. So the Australian Children of God had been raided, and it was in 1992. 144 children were removed and confiscated, taken into custody by police. Now, Hall and Johnson go into this, and they show quite a bit of footage from the Australian news. Apparently a documentary was being made about this Children of God community. It was headed by the very glamorous Anne Hamilton Byrne, who looked like a movie star, and she claimed she loved children, and she would present photos of the children in her commune all dressed with bows and ribbons, and they looked so, spruced up and shiny, apple-cheeked. But as adults, they're interviewed by Australian TV, and they disclosed that they were treated horribly on a daily basis. And a lot of it was very cruel, I don't know if it was sensory deprivation or just situations of food deprivation and whatnot. And then sex as well. They had sexual abuse going on. So at one point in this array of clips that you see that Hall and Johnson give us that are purportedly filmed by the Australian television or the documentary makers, or they're just old footage, I guess. This would be old footage. You see this snippet, it's video, and you see a blonde boy, he's about 10 or 12, and he's wearing a blue shirt, and he's running straight at the camera, and this is Julian Assange to me. He's got the moon face, the white blonde hair, and this, he has that kind of wide nose. We can't just go on that. We have to go on a little more. So Julian Assange never apparently knew who his real father was. His mother, Christine Assange, married a musician when Julian was 8. And this musician was a member of the Australian family. So at that point in his life, Julian went to live with the Australian family, and he was evidently there from the age of 8 to 16. And this bit of video would have been shot in that time period because he definitely looked between the ages of 8 to 16, and the face looks quite a bit like the child Julian.
Yeah, no, I watched the clip, Sofia, and it should raise an eyebrow. As I'd mentioned to you, we don't know for sure, but when you start piecing the other pieces together, you could definitely land there. And it was his stepfather, right? That was with the family. It was his stepdad, yeah. And when you said that you had done a newsletter on the Children of God, what they were into was very depraved. There's no question about it. I want to make sure the audience understands that this isn't just your run-of-the-mill type of cult. I mean, they were heavily into pedophilia, and the women that were in the Children of God, they used to call it flirty fishing, but basically what it was to go out, prostitute yourself, come back get pregnant, and then that would enable them to bring in more children within the quote-unquote the family. So it's painting a very disturbing picture at the very least. And so we know that these cults have a heavy, heavy mind control component to them.
Yeah, Mike, the Children of God was headed by somebody called Dave Berg, and there were several documentaries made about Children of God, which now calls itself the Family International. So they had divisions in many different countries. They were like small countries or villages unto themselves, very separated from the rest of the community. And they were anywhere from South America to Australia, United States. They were right in the middle of LA and cities, as well as out in the jungle. But the idea behind Children of God was originally religious. They were playing guitars and singing. Right. So it makes sense that a musician would join Children of God. In fact, a lot of musicians that we know of who are famous today started out with Children of God, and then they revealed what they had to go through when they were in it. But regardless, there were sub-leaders of these divisions of the family, and this Anne Hamilton Byrne, was evidently the star personality. This is the whole thing. They have these charismatic leaders who are often beautiful, and people hang on the hems of beautiful people, right? And hang on their words. So Julian was a teenager when he was with Children of God in a very, very vulnerable time of his life. When you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, you can be shaped in all kinds of ways. So I then found out that there are all these gaps in his career. You don't know where he worked from this year to that year, and Hall goes through this, Hall and Johnson. he claims, Julian, that his code that he wrote is in all the Apple products, yet Apple has never said any such thing. So you don't really know what he did, for instance, between 1999 and 2006. But we do know that at one time, Julian was attending Melbourne University, which is in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, and he was a graduate student in mathematics, so he's obviously quite a whiz at numbers, right? But he was being funded with other graduate students at Melbourne University by the NSA and DARPA, and he was put to work on refining something, I think this is a cover story, called Grizzly Plow, which was a military bulldozer used in Operation Desert Storm in the 1991 Gulf War. So Grizzly Plow was designed to chug through sand fronted with barbed wire and bury enemy soldiers alive. But it had some problems. It would be damaged by the sand, and they were asking these math and physics whizzes to figure out how to fix this vulnerability of Grizzly Plow. And now we hear from Assange that, well, he got disillusioned working on this kind of project and helping, military with killing people, presumably. So
burying them alive, yeah. That's probably would make me a little disillusioned too, but go ahead.
But if that's the case, it makes a good cover story. But anyway, so he went on from there to found WikiLeaks. And the beginning of WikiLeaks was in this house. I'm trying to remember where exactly this house was. But if you read...
Is this the one that was owned by Soros?
No, that comes later. That's when he was in exile.
Okay.
He was self-exiled to protect himself from... He's now in exile because he's got these rape charges. Apparently, letting information out is okay with the Swedish government. But if you find out that somebody has raped somebody, then that's different. So he's not able to be in Sweden anymore. So now he's in the Ecuadorian embassy. I believe it's in London.
London, yep.
And at one point, he was staying in a house that's owned by George Soros. So once again, he's got some amazing connections. But anyway, when he was setting up at the beginning of WikiLeaks, he was, in a house where there were only computer geeks and beds everywhere. And this woman who was interviewed about that particular phase of his life, she apparently lived in the house too. She said Assange would forget to eat or sleep. He wrote mathematical formulas all over the walls. He had only red light bulbs in his room, and he ate one meal every 2 days. So he is a weirdo, you could say, and he's very, very smart. And obviously, if he's working on Grizzly Plow, if that's even a real deal, a true story, somebody has noticed him. Somebody has decided to fund him and others like him, and that somebody would be DARPA, the U.S. military, U.S. government. And remember, these are foreign students. So I am going to posit that Julian was recognized early in life as being this thing that's called, this is in powers that be language, a rising star. In intelligence language, a rising star is someone that they have identified very early on as being extremely useful. And they have to have qualities that are unusual. I mean, they usually are very intelligent. They are strong. But one of the key things about a rising star profile, they profile you, of course, in the military and other arenas, and they'll select you as a rising star. And this is available. This information was first imparted to me by watching the Kay Griggs interviews, which are on YouTube. Kay Griggs was a military wife who became a whistleblower upon her husband, Colonel George Griggs, who was a trainer of assassins and who evidently didn't want to be. And when he got drunk, he would spill the beans and tell his wife very sorrowfully that all he ever wanted to do was have a hardware store. And now look at me, I train assassins for the American military. And can you believe it? So all the generals, I should say not all, because how do I know, but for the most part, the people who've reached the top levels of organization in this world, and they might include military leaders, government and political leaders. Obama was referred to as a rising star quite often by the press. They could be in banking, they could be in law, they could be all over the place in many different sectors of society. But definitely in, for instance, the government, the military, and then you have rising stars in the Marines, you have rising stars in the SEALs, you have them in Delta Force, you have them in the Rangers, and they are particularly trainable. Many are subjected to mind control, and this would include the people in the military and the government and anywhere. Rising stars they have handlers assigned to them when they're selected, and they are crafted. A rising star is a created thing. And that's what I think Julian Assange could very well be. He would have been a rising star, selected in his youth and trained to be strategic asset.
You know, one of the things you just mentioned, Sofia, that resonated with me, and it's something that I try to tell folks, is that all of these people that have positions of power and influence, none of these people are organic. These people have been brought along, and whether they were rising stars starting from a very early age, identified as somebody that was going to go through the pipeline and was going to be doing this, and that at certain points later on in their life. Like you mentioned Obama. I mean, Obama, as an example, we have a guy that nobody knows anything about his childhood. Then he becomes he has a title as a community organizer. Nobody really knows what that is. Then he becomes a one-term senator. I don't even think he completed his one term, and then he becomes president. So how did that happen, right? Just using him as an example, everybody that's in a position of power has been put there. And in order for them to be there, they had to pay their dues. They had to go through programs, whether they be mind control programs, whether it's because of secret societies and fraternal orders, whatever it may be. There are no genuine, organic people out there in positions of quote-unquote leadership. They have an agenda. They've been handed a job description by those above them. And some of those people, we might know who some of those names are. Many of them we do not, and you'll never know. So it's just very interesting to me, you know, as you're taking us through this, how, you know, he's really, when you think about it, Assange is a microcosm of the overall process.
Definitely. I'm looking for the name of the Hall Andrews video. It's in my newsletter somewhere, but it's on my blog, sofiasmallstorm.com, and all you
Is it WikiLeaks made by the NSA or something like that?
Yeah. Okay, so what does he say about Julian Assange? I'm going to quote him. He says, this is in part 1 of 4. This is either Hall or Johnson from the video. It's called WikiLeaks Made by the NSA, and there's part 1 through part 4, and that's on YouTube. So we learn from them, and I'm quoting now, just how much of a handled entity Julian Assange is. Assange is not an independent activist, but is chauffeured around by establishment handlers. He is not a wanted criminal. He is not being given asylum. He is not a whistleblower. He's not an advocate of freedom of information. He is an intelligence-created tool being used to front one of the biggest psyops currently in operation on this planet. WikiLeaks is funded and supported by globalists who are using it for a number of agendas.
Well, that about sums it up. I don't know how much more I can add on to that. I think they hit the nail right on the head, Sofia. He is an intelligence operative and asset. And it goes back to what we said to start the show, that, you know, there's this whole apparatus that's around him, and how did it all get there? And how is he connected into it? How is he networked? How does he know all these people? How does he get to live in a house that's owned by George Soros? How does that happen? You know, so something smells very, very fishy, to say the least.
Yeah, and when you think about, okay, so I call this artificial intelligence because it's an intel dump, an instant intel dump on us. And they know we're going to, it's like throwing a ton of dog treats out into the African savannah and then letting all the hounds go loose and watch them all scurrying and racing and competing for the dog treats.
No, it was like that feeding frenzy with the Podesta emails, right?
Right. So what was the kernel, the most horrifying kernel of the Podesta emails? It was the pedophilia and the satanic abuse, the ritual abuse of children, potential sacrifice, the disappearance of children. So, to me, that suggests that they are pushing, eventually this is going to get out in the mainstream, that there is rampant pedophilia. And I heard on television, Channel 7, it was the 4th of July time period, that 1,000 dogs in San Diego had been chipped the week before 4th of July. And owners did so because they were informed that this is a way to recover your dog should the fireworks scare him to the extent that he jumps the fence and runs off, right? So if your dog is chipped, you won't lose him. He's not going to end up in the pound adopted by somebody else. And I believe that as the knowledge of pedophilia, which we're hearing now, we're hearing it from people like Nicole Kidman, we're hearing it, it was in the past from victims in Hollywood. They spoke out. Certain stars, when they were teenagers, admitted to this happening to them. But now we're hearing it from a motley crew of people from Hollywood admitting it. And yet, from the Podesta emails, it wasn't just about pedophilia in Hollywood. Well, it wasn't even about that. It was about that happening in politics at the highest levels and at all the mid-levels as well. So Washington, D.C. So I think this is going to encourage, or induce is a better word, the mainstream parent pool to chip their children. Because if you chip your child, a black tinted window car is not going to be able to pull up while he's on his way to school, or getting off the school bus, and whisk your child away behind the tinted windows and take him off somewhere to Bohemian Grove where he's put in, these camps, and these CEOs do these terrible things to him, and you will never hear of him again. Or he'll wind up in the White House like, what was his name? Johnny Gosh ends up being Jeff Gannon or something like that. That's the legend, right? Around an abduction in childhood. So if you have a chipped child, you can always keep track of your child. And so my prediction, this is my wild imagination going, that America's middle-class children will be chipped. That's a no-brainer. And yet, what is happening behind the scenes? Behind the scenes, we've got artificial reproduction going on and experiments in artificial reproduction. And I'm talking about test tube babies, artificial insemination, the harvesting of eggs, the donation of sperm. And this is occurring at colleges. College students are being solicited for sperm donation and egg harvesting. And these products, these biological products, are being experimented with in certain countries, in certain labs. Now, the current rate, I learned from Janice Barcelo, you can look up her work. She's done quite extensive research into the artificial insemination, artificial reproduction world. She informed me recently that the rate of failure of conceiving babies in this artificial way is currently at 80%. So that's a high failure rate. But with the resources and the money available to these industries that favor this kind of thing, so human reproduction removed from human beings and occurring in petri dishes and artificial wombs. So having the state and technology as the actual producer of the child, and then ultimately the parent of the child will be the state. That business is in the hopper right now. It's being developed. And I predict that the babies that will be created from this gene pool, you might have a great number of them someday. And these will be the unchipped, undocumented population of children. So we'll have a documented pool of children, which will have real parents, they'll live in real families, and they will have chips in them, and they will not be abducted. And we will be told that the chipping has worked. The pedophiles are not abducting children anymore. Yet, the supply of children for purposes, these very, very nefarious purposes within these pedophile rings and satanic abuse rings. Those children will come from the undocumented pool that are scientifically created. And I call those the paperless children.
So they'll have their own baby farm and harvest babies using technology. They will essentially be motherless, fatherless. And so they'll be using these babies for all of their sick behavior, is what you're saying.
Right. So the real driving purpose behind the Podesta email dump might well be for mainstream parents to hurry up and ship their children.
Now, how much of it, Sophia, do you think could also be the release of these emails? Let's not forget, too, they also introduced the occult with spirit cooking. Probably should remember that aspect of it, too. But how much of it do you think could also be that it's a desensitizing tool? In other words, it was creeping out there as far as pedophilia being a big problem within the elite class, within the ruling class, politicians, and so on. And putting it out there now, it basically conditions people. You hear it, you become acclimated. Oh, you're aghast at first. And then it basically just settles. And people go about their business and, and it's out there, it's come and gone. We've seen this with so many things that appear at first to be groundbreaking revelations of truth that really would shake the very ground that the masses are standing on, only to see it just completely dissipate down the line and it's business as usual. So how much of it, I agree that, by the way, your premise, I think, is very logical and it could very well be what they're doing. But how much of it also do you think is conditioning?
Well, conditioning is like the Siamese twin of the whole thing. They're definitely conditioning us. I mean, look what I said to you before we started about Elvis the Pelvis, that I watched that movie with him and Anne Margaret, Viva Las Vegas, and I could not believe the kind of dancing they were doing. This Anne Margaret wiggling and jiggling and literally her eyes rolling in her head. And I thought it was obscene, totally gross and disgusting. And you told me it wouldn't bother anyone today.
No, probably now all the guys that are listening are going to watch the movie.
Gross.
No, what we were saying, folks, is what I said was, and Sophia is like, she's not putting it in full context. What I had said was what they do is they start with something like Elvis with his dancing, which was very sexualized in the 1950s. And because of the advent of television, they pumped it into everybody's living rooms. Of course, the older generation, the parents at that time, were losing their minds over this. What the heck's going on? Look at this guy. He's gyrating around, and you got Anne Margaret jiggling on film in Viva Las Vegas. But the thing is, what they do is they put that out there, and then they move to the next level of shock and awe, right? And then what occurred before that becomes normalized. People become conditioned to it, so it's not as shocking anymore. So and we take a look at Elvis going back into the 1950s. I think it's when he did a lot of his movies, right, the late 50s into the early 60s. Fast forward 50 years now, and we take a look at what's going on now. That was my point. And then when you look at his movie like Viva Las Vegas, you're thinking, well, all right, I could see where it would have been disturbing back in the 1950s or the 60s, but look at what we've got today. So the point I'm making is that they keep stepping it up, right? They keep making it more and more outrageous, and people are becoming more and more conditioned to the outrageous.
Right, because what followed the gross dancing of Viva Las Vegas was Woodstock. Now, they're not dancing necessarily, they are, but they're having sex out in the open, and they're rolling in feces and piss and all this, and it's raining, and they talk about gross, that's gross.
And drugs. And drugs.
Right. So that's a step up from a simple movie with somebody jiggling her boobs and butt, and Elvis flipping his stupid bangs, and he had 4-inch heels on, I want you to know. And they never filmed his feet. They avoided showing his high heels as often as they could, because he was short, I bet.
Well, it sounds to me like you are not an Elvis fan. We talked about this earlier, too, before the show. Elvis was, in all likelihood, another one of these, maybe a rising star, another one that was identified very early on in his life. Most likely he was in some kind of government program, could be a mind control program. So we have another example where somebody was brought along. I mean, that's possible, right?
It's possible. And mascara, his eyelashes all pinched together. Nobody's eyelashes are like that. I'm going to stop now because I'm going to do more work into Elvis. But you're exactly right. It's all about conditioning. And when the parents chip their children, just as they're chipping their dogs now, they're going to say, I'm not worried about pedophilia. Not my kid. She's got a chip. We can always keep track of her. In fact, there might be a way to telephone you through your chip someday. Yeah. Your chip will ring and the child will signal back to its parent through its brain. Or the chip will reveal on a little iPhone exactly where the child is. Talk about no privacy.
No, I mean, the technology is all out there. As an example, you and I, we've talked about this a little bit. I think we shared some YouTube clips offline where there are companies today that are chipping their employees, and employees are voluntarily chipping so that they can open the door at work by just putting their hand up to the sensor, or being able to buy something out of the vending machine. This is ridiculous. The biggest problem that we have, and what's really most mind-boggling, Sophia, is there are people that see nothing wrong with this, and they just sign up for it. It's like, wait, well, are you kidding me? Instead of using my badge to go in and out to get to the printer room in my office, I could just raise my hand. Who wouldn't want to do that? It boggles my mind.
Mike, I just want you to know that there was a phase in my life when I was a darkroom printer for photographers. And I had one hand for fixer and one hand for developer. I should have said it the other way. One hand for developer and one hand for fixer. I didn't use gloves. I was very fast. I loved doing it. I kept my hands in the right bowls, and my left hand turned bright yellow for a long time. And I remember my uncle looking at it once, and he said, "Why is your hand that color?" I said, "Oh, it must be the developer." And he said, "Why are you not wearing gloves?" I said, "Why do I need gloves?" And I literally thought that I was invincible in that regard, that I could dump my hands in these toxic chemicals and make these beautiful photographs appear, because I was struck by the beauty of the photos. I didn't want to waste time on tongs, and fumble around. My hands were better. I knew exactly when to pull, when to stop. I knew how fast it was going to develop afterwards, even because it does. And I loved it. It was like in my blood. So I can understand why. And it was literally going in my blood. I can understand why people would not put a fence up against technology. Because when you're young, you're into the ability to do something.
You're into the technology. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not against technology. I think that technology is great, as long as the technology is being used for the betterment of humanity. The problem that we have is that in very few cases is it being used for the betterment of humanity. It's always disguised that. But, you don't have to dig too deep to figure out that there's a bunch of not so good things and nefarious things that are really lying underneath the covers. But I understand your point. In your July newsletter, you talk about artificial intelligence and then also intelligence augmentation. And these are two different concepts. So if you could take the audience through this, because I thought this part of the newsletter was just terrific. Because as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, Mike, I worked the subject of artificial intelligence into, I think it was the last show I did with you, but I hadn't stumbled into this article. And I have to say that the way that you just walk into stuff when it fits perfectly with what you've just learned recently or just been into recently or talked about. So I use the term artificial intelligence for the WikiLeaks form of giving us information. That's intel, right? It's a planned instantaneous dump of inside information. The way that artificial intelligence is used colloquially is about technology. It's futurism, that one day machines will possibly be smarter than we are And the presumption is we built a machine, so now they're going to race ahead of us. But people like Peter Thiel, Ray Kurzweil, Elon Musk is, I think, taking the position that this could be a dangerous thing, whereas Ray Kurzweil is saying, oh no, I can't wait till it happens. This future of AI is apparently only half of the scene. The other half of the picture, or the other side of the fence, you could say, is IA. And I had never heard of IA. So this was a surprise to me. And apparently these subjects are two different sides of a debate or a coin in the high-tech engineering world. So they each have their adherents, and their adherents are always at odds with one another and arguing. So one side is interested in automating the human experience. The other side wants to augment human intelligence, and both are going to do this with technology. So AI is the world of artificial intelligence, which is an automation or machine technological replication of what humans can do. So effectively, to make robots that can do and be as humans are.
So replace humans in a way, in a sense? In other words, AI would be a replacement of humans?
AI seeks to copy and mimic and recreate what humans do. That's automation of the human experience, mechanization of the human experience. And what that is going to do ultimately is replace humans in the workplace, because there's more and more mechanization that can now do what humans used to do. So yes, the danger of AI is that it will crowd us out. And when we talk about the singularity, the day when it's something, around the mid-century now, they project that the marriage of man with machine, that's actually not AI. I used to think that was AI, but it's not. That's really IA, the augmentation, meaning the enhancement of human intelligence, human capability with the assistance of, or the addition of technology. And so these are contrasting ideals.
So IA, though, it would seem to me that it would be reserved for a select group. In other words, not everybody is going to be intelligence augmented. Only those, I guess, that are deemed as part of the club, if you will, that the elite class, if you will, the ruling class, would participate in that. And everybody else is basically, I don't know, like go fend for yourself. It's like the Hunger Games or something. But is that your take on it, that it's going to be reserved for select few?
I am again going to predict with my overactive imagination that as AI crowds the workaday human out of the world, IA is going to beef up, improve, add to elites, the elite human. So the interest is to crowd us out so that we are rendered obsolete, unworthy of our keep, of the food we eat, the space we take up, unsustainable. Whereas certain other people will have the nanobots coursing through their blood, the bioengineering and the biotechnology at their disposal to be eternally young or
not get sick,
have Google in their brain, that kind of thing. So that's the possibility. And in the world of AI, you're getting people who are making emotional arguments and cases for machines. So this Doug Engelbart and this other rival he had called Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky apparently was a mathematician who pioneered artificial intelligence, and he was about downloading human intelligence into a computer. So one is about putting the man into the machine, and the other is about putting the machine into the man. So AI wants to put the man into the machine and make a machine like a man, whereas IA wants to put the machine into the man.
Right. Right. Or the technology into the man. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the two gurus, Minsky and Engelbart, met at MIT, and they supposedly said this to each other. Minsky supposedly said, "We're going to make machines intelligent. We're going to make them conscious." And Engelbart replied, "You're going to do all that for the machines? What are you going to do for the people?"
How long ago was this, Sophia, when this conversation was had?
In the 1950s, supposedly at MIT.
Okay, so we're talking about 65 years ago.
Okay, so now we're all familiar, not all maybe, but a lot of us are familiar. We've heard this term strong AI, right?
Right.
So strong AI is the term that describes computer intelligence or performance that comes across in a human way. So we see this, or we more likely hear it when we call up some 800 number for some corporation and we get a menu that has friendly language, which is all machine language, but it's saying, "Oh, okay, I get it. You need help. You need help with blah, blah, blah. Is that right?" And then you say yes or no, and it says, "Got it." Well, that's a form of strong AI. They are studying us, Mike, and I believe in my overactive imagination that all of this Facebook and Twitter and all of the fielding of our behavior, our likes, our dislikes, our personalities, our snapshots, our everything on Instagram and all this social media is a way of collecting the behavioral spectrum, data on the behavioral spectrum of humankind. And that's going to be used to create strong AI.
Yeah, it's interesting you should bring that up because I was going to ask you about, all this data mining that's done. Let's just take Google as an example, right? Everybody's putting queries in, Google searching and all that stuff. Where does that fit in, do you think, Sophia? What are they doing with that? A lot of people like to think it's all being surveilled and all that stuff, but I think there's a much larger issue or initiative underway. I think what they're doing is doing exactly what you had just said when you mentioned Facebook, is they are mining all this stuff to better understand humans' thinking of and approaches and thinking about trying to calculate and figure out human reactions to situations or circumstances. In other words, what they're doing is they're compiling millions and billions and trillions of pieces of information to formulate an intelligence which would encompass the human way.
To build a strong AI, a machine intelligence, in our imitation. To imitate us, to recreate, replicate the whole panoramic spectrum of human behavior with machines. That's the real utility of the social media universe. And remember that they have immense computing resources, and they will put those to work. They are putting those to work, studying everything they can pluck off social media, because that's how we communicate primarily today. Since when do we get together and take a walk in the park and have a chat?
Yeah. So what happens to the folks that don't have the opportunity to have their intelligence augmented, the technology to help to augment their capabilities, their humanity, their thinking, their brain, and all that stuff? What happens to those that don't get that upgrade?
Well, right now, that's the greater proportion of humanity that's not slated for improvement. And remember that we are suffering the effects of a huge array of assaults. Our bodies are declining. Our biology is collapsing. Our health is waning. Our thinking, our self-preservation instincts are collapsing on themselves also, right? So I foresee that the bulk of humanity is going to be greatly reduced. Take a look at the Georgia Guidestones. And as that reduction takes place, there's going to be a boiling down. When they talk about culling, as I've said many, many times before, culling is a selection process. but it's a biological selection process. So as the biology of many living forms starts to capsize and many individuals within species die, right now our life expectancy is falling. We are living in a death culture, and we've got the trappings of that all around us with the satanic themes and whatnot. You know how even with cancer survivors, you hear all this survivor. He's a survivor. What's the opposite? Somebody who doesn't survive, somebody who dies. So just by using that word, the very inference behind that word is that there's death. Death is the flip side of surviving. So that's why they call these people all survivors, because they haven't died. And so we're in this death culture, which is being enhanced and built and what's the word I want? Embellished constantly. And the day will come when there won't be very many quote unquote survivors of these biological assaults that we're all having to weather at this time. And they will be so boiled down, Mike, that they will be a prototypical form in and of themselves. And at that point, it could be that they get augmentation in terms of some kind of technology to make them the proper slave form that has been envisioned in the first place.
So what happens, Sofia, to everything today revolves around commerce. Everything's commerce, consumerism. So these companies, Amazon as an example, pick on Amazon. The only reason why they're there is because it's a system of commerce and people go there, they spend their money and so on. So at the end of the day, and I don't know how long this is going to take, right? So it could be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years from now. What happens to all of these companies? I mean, do they just stop using a system of commerce? Do the elites or the ruling class say, you know, we don't need it anymore? We don't have all these people out there. We don't have all these consumers out there anymore because we've eradicated that problem or that aspect of it. So does the whole, in your view, down the line, does the whole model then change? That's what I'm trying to get my head wrapped around.
I think, Mike, that Amazon isn't just existing because of commerce. It has a bigger aim, which is to drive out small suppliers, small vendors, like me, for instance.
Yeah.
Amazon is going to use drones now. I put a video on my blog of this portly man in Britain in the countryside who orders, I don't know what it is, dog biscuits or something off Amazon, and then he toddles out to his backyard and a drone is bringing him a shoebox kind of thing with his stuff that he just bought 30 minutes ago. And the drones fly at 400 feet and they deposit this package in your backyard and you waddle out to pick it up. And this is the new world. You're going to look up and you're going to see the sky full of not just chemtrails, thank you, but drones from Amazon. And you won't have to go anywhere and you'll just get fatter and fatter and dumber.
But what happens when the waddling guy doesn't exist anymore? Amazon has nothing to deliver because that base of people who are buying stuff are not there anymore, or it's so small that it becomes not profitable, or there's no reason to be in business anymore. I mean, do you see it going in that direction, and then they break out an entirely new model for society that is, you know, obviously it's to the benefit of the ruling class?
There will always be somebody left because they need somebody to rule and they need somebody to work for them. Now, at one time, I predicted that they would use human biology to power technology through the piezoelectric, the donation of movement that is now considered wasted movement. Like you, I'm looking at you on video and you're blinking. Stop it. This is a waste of energy. But the day will come when your blinking will be harnessed and it will be put into a battery attached to your pant leg that will also be harnessing the venous return, the humming and thrumming of breathing and muscle movement and all kinds of vibrations that your body is putting out, and you will have created this many kilowatts by the end of the day. And they're going to stick our energy source behind technology. So they're going to want humans because we're a free source of energy and we'll be a free source of labor, and there will be some boiled down human beings left, and Amazon or whatever it's going to be called at that point will be the supply chain. We will not have the privilege of getting in our car and going to the mall and choosing what we want. We will have it dumped on our heads. We might need a little bit of food or food-like substances. They might be completely artificially created energy drinks that we suck, that are piped IV into us. But it will be delivered by the supply chain that Amazon will have been the precursor for. So the elites want to be the enhanced ones, the truly enhanced ones, and we will be made into the echt robot slave. We will be some amalgam, some joinder of what is left of human biology, not human being. The being will be gone, and machine form, and we will work. We will enjoy working. We will love our little pink or orange formula that we drink through our vein.
Do I blink too much? Is that what you were telling me?
No, I'm just saying they consider this wasted motion.
I know. No, I mean, it's kind of very interesting to take a look at what's happening, what has already happened. We should start there. Then project out as to what we think may happen based upon, the research. And then trying to look out even further to get an idea of what this is all going to be about 2 decades from now, 5 decades from now, 100 years from now. It's very, very weird. And sometimes it can become very, very surreal because, your logic wants to put the brakes on and say, no, it's not going to go there. It can't possibly go there, because in order for it to get to that end state, so many things have got to change and so many things have to happen. But the truth of the matter is, Sophia, if we take a look back at just about anything, if we go back 50 years ago or 100 years ago, people were probably having those exact same conversations 100 years ago if they said that we would be able to do the things that we're doing today. As an example, you have a phone that also is essentially a portable little computer. And if that was explained to somebody back in the early 1900s, they would say, get out of here. That's not going to happen. You're crazy. That's science fiction stuff. That's never going to happen. You know what would have to happen between now and then to have that type of device? And they would just shrug it off. I think that really you have to use your imagination along with, the realization that they're doing these things to be able to get some insight, or at least get the critical thinking juices going to say, well, where is this going to be 50 years from now? What's it going to look like? I don't know. And in the way you're explaining it, I agree. I mean, it's really not going to be a good thing. I mean, it's going to be a good thing for a select few, but for everybody else, it's not going to be so good.
Listen, I went to the gym, which I don't do very often in the summertime. I prefer to exercise outdoors in case anyone's thinking I'm a couch potato. But anyway, I went to the gym because it was a very weird, misty, rainy type of day. And coming out, I encountered this very nice elderly woman in the parking lot. And we had a little conversation. We were talking about the weather, and it ended up being a longer conversation. And I told her I was going to go home and make soup. And she said, oh, no, go into Vaughn's. That was the grocery store right next to us. She said, they have amazing soup. And I said, but I'm making the soup myself. I want my soup, not their soup. And then she tried to encourage me to, anytime I was bored, to go down to the Sheraton in La Jolla and sit and watch the karaoke. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm supposed to go and watch humans sing assisted by a machine? Why? And she thought these were wonderful things to do, to buy soup that someone else made that I don't know what's in, and go and listen to karaoke at the Sheraton, rather than somebody really singing somewhere, myself. This was a person advocating that I do what she has learned to do and enjoy, and she puts as a priority in her life. And she told me that, she was a lovely woman. I am not critical of her. I'm just thinking in wonderment. She told me she grew up in the South, and she cooked for her whole family, and she doesn't want to cook anymore. She wants to go to the grocery store and buy it. And she would rather, I mean, all her children were singers growing up, but she would rather go and listen to people singing through this karaoke machine or with it, which there's voice enhancement in that particular kind of rendition. You know, it's not just you singing on your own speed or out of your own larynx. It's the machine improves your singing, so you sound like you're good.
You sound better, yeah, auto-tune. It's called auto-tune, yeah.
So, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that already we're seeing people who like this and prefer it, and it's completely, acceptable to them. They're encouraging other people to do it.
Yeah, no, I get it, Sophia, I do, and like you said, we're not picking on anybody because God knows I know people and I love them. I do. And I know that they got their head set in the matrix. The thing is, they don't know it. That's the most frustrating aspect of it is that people fall into a routine or they fall into an existence and they don't understand where it is that they're operating. They don't understand that they're being manipulated is how I probably should phrase it, and that they're being steered. That's really the brilliant part of the wickedness of the system that's in place is that people are unaware of their slavery. They're unaware of the fact that they're shackled. And so, it's very difficult. Like I said, most folks are in that space. And so you can't beat them up for it. All you can do is do the things that you and I are doing and many others are doing is try to talk about it. And hopefully they listen to a radio show or they read a blog or whatever. And maybe it just sets a little spark off for them and and they'll pay more attention and they'll figure things out. But man, I'll tell you what, for most people though, it's never going to get there.
Look, I did a trade with a friend who's going to send me something that he has upgraded, a piece of technology, okay? And he's shipping it to me, and I am going to be the recipient, the happy recipient, because I don't have to go out and buy one now. And he asked for products in exchange. I said, okay, no problem. That's easy. And he wrote me an email today to tell me that my package was on the way, but he had been taking Restore, and it has done nothing for him, so don't send any more. And I wrote back, I said, no, you have to keep taking it. You just give it a chance. Finish the bottle. We're going back to Restore, which we're probably going to do in every show. And I'm horrified that I haven't succeeded in explaining to him why this is so important. And he's actually turning down an opportunity to get more when he could get more.
Was he looking to get better about something? In other words, did he have a health issue or what was he taking Restore for?
I sent it to him because I am telling everyone I care about that this is a very important thing to take. And by the way, I'm watching a documentary series called GMOs Revealed. This is 9 episodes, I think, and it's going to be aired on YouTube, GMOs Revealed, for 24 hours at a time. So I don't know when you're going to be able to post this, but people could go and buy the set, I imagine. And Zachary Bush, the whole brain behind Restore, is in it. And in episode 1, he has a very long bit. He's in 6 episodes. And I'm learning all about glyphosate, way more than I ever learned from previous interviews with him. But the thing is this, Mike, it takes so much energy and effort to explain to the average mainstream person, the person who's been conditioned into being blind and even self-destructive. You cannot explain Restore in even 5 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
And you send somebody a bottle and they're so out of it. They're so out of touch with their own body that they can't even tell that this is doing any good, or they don't give it a chance because they want to have some opiate type feeling from it the first time they take a swig of it. But this is what they expect. They expect an instant gratification or instant results, instantaneous results, and they don't want to be a follower of this logic if just because there is a profound basis for why you should be taking it long term. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
Well, that's because we live in a society of instant gratification, right? They're so used to, Sophia, they're not used to investing in themselves. In fact, very few people invest in themselves. And what I mean by investing, folks, is taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, eating the right foods, nutrition, those types of things. And so people, they're not focused on that. Their idea of taking care of your mind and body is if I don't feel good, go to the doctor, they'll prescribe me a pill. That's instant gratification. Oh, just take the pill, you'll feel better. So I completely get what you're saying. I know some friends, and one of the spouses has become ill, very ill. I had talked to them about, look, you should try Restore. Give it a shot. Sent them the information over with a couple of other pieces of information. Didn't hear back about Restore and a lot of the other stuff I sent over. They got back to me on one thing, and 4 other things were basically left off the table as far as not being discussed. That was their way of saying, thank you, but no thank you. You can't get people to stop for a moment and to look at what they should look at. It's like I always tell people, if I send you something, and not that I'm a genius, but there's a lot of stuff that I've looked into. If I send you something, I've looked at it, and it might be worth your while to have your own look at it and research it a little bit. But I don't know. That's why, I've always said we do these shows, Sophia, and we have a niche audience, and I know that we have a niche audience, and I know, I've had this discussion with you before, and you keep telling me keep going, Mike, but that's part of the whole deal. I mean, it's just the way it is. There's going to be that small segment of people that are going to take the ball and run with it, and there's going to be a whole lot of other people that don't even know the ball exists, and that's what we're dealing with most of the time. People who don't know the ball exists.
Right. Well, as far as I can tell, Restore is my new thing, and I'm going to mention it in all my shows with you. I just want people to know that a lot of people bought it from my first show with you that I did about Restore in great detail. And I do have bulk pricing now for it for listeners and your friends if you're interested. But you have to email me for that. And if you go to avatarproducts.com and you look at Restore, it will explain how you obtain the bulk pricing from me. So you have to inquire for it. I'm not allowed to post it.
Are you getting feedback from folks that are using it saying that they've noticed a difference? They've gotten healthier, they feel better. Are you getting that type of input?
Lots of input. In fact, I just heard yesterday from someone who had what's called dysmenorrhea, heavy periods, and also it can be painful periods. She said hers were so bad she couldn't even leave the house for a couple of days. And she said since she's been on Restore, that's all gone, which is amazing because what do you do for that? It's very difficult to improve or remedy something like that, So I don't know if it's coincidental. And somebody described that the behavior of their son was much better. He's a small child, a toddler, but I think it really calms people down. I've discovered that I've become calmer and much more happy on a daily basis, which you cannot buy. Money can't buy me love. And happiness, it can't buy.
You better stop singing Beatles songs. You remember what your piano teacher told you. Yeah.
And that was Let It Be.
Yeah, I know. It was still a Beatles song.
All right. Well, Mike, if you can take this lignite extract that puts carbon molecules into your body that help you regulate your health, closes up your gut membrane so that the right things are kept in and the wrong things don't get out. And this is how I rationalize it. On a cellular level, you are now in better order. You are organized. And that translates to a conscious level because you don't feel that you are in this state of disarray, which produces, if you're in disarray on the cellular level, it's a no-brainer to me that you're going to feel out of sorts mentally, right?
Right.
And so the stability that Restore brings to your body translates into a much better emotional, mental, even spiritual, psychic, psycho-spiritual, psychological stability, which is basically well-being. It's pretty amazing in this regard. And that's been my experience of it and the experience of several other people who are close to me.
Well, as I mentioned in a couple of other shows, and it's still the case, Sophia, the acid reflux issue that I had, and I had for a very long time, is under control. I don't really have a problem with acid reflux anymore. And it started not having the problem when I started taking Restore. So for me, it's worth it just for that, because for a lot of people, GERD and acid reflux can be very painful, and it limits what you can eat. So you can go to bed at night sometimes, and you can wake up in the middle of the night with this burning sensation in your throat and in your chest and stuff. And so I know a lot of folks that suffer from it, and I've been trying to get them to at least take a look at it and try it. I told them that my own testimonial is it helped me. It essentially eradicated the acid reflux problem that I had. So hopefully people are listening. I know it sounds like an infomercial we're doing, but it's just that there's something out there that can possibly help people in a lot of ways. So we're recommending that you give it a shot.
And the whole idea behind advertising is exposure. So someone who understood sales told me many years ago that when people are exposed between 5 and 8 times, they'll eventually buy. This is why you get the LL Bean catalog in your mailbox over and over and over. And whatever it costs these companies to print and distribute these catalogs, it must be made up for it in the sales of sheets and slippers and dog beds and whatnot. So I keep talking about Restore, not because it's my new religion, it almost is, but because I'm so excited when I hear someone tell me how much benefit they've gotten or what kind of benefit they've gotten. I wish you could come up with more than just your acid reflux, Mike, but I'm glad that it's made you happy in that regard and satisfied. But yeah, there are any number of things that Restore has the potential to restore. Now, this isn't medical advice. We're not speaking in curative terms.
So you wish I was more medically broken? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, isn't there anything else that it's done for you besides that?
That's a big thing for me. That's a huge thing for me. I'm going to go with that. I did say in one of the shows that I did notice that my thinking seemed clearer. Now, again, that's going to be difficult to kind of draw directly back to Restore, but I noticed that my thinking just seemed more fluid, clearer, if that counts for anything. But again, I can't direct line it back to Restore. However, the acid reflux, I can.
No, Mike, your thinking counts. I accept that. The improvement in your thinking.
So I have 2 things now.
Two things.
Next show, she'll want me to come up with 3 and 4.
So many. I discover so many things all the time. I notice, this has gone away. Well, when did I notice that for the first time? Oh, well, when I started taking Restore. Now I don't notice this particular symptom, right? But once again, the depth of sleep, the creative dreams. My God, I never had dreams like this before. And people tell me that the dreams that they never used to remember their dreams, and now they're remembering all their dreams. And it's fascinating, and they carry the dreams with them into the day and ponder them. They invented Hollywood, Mike, because our dreams disappeared, because we lost connection with the earth and with electrons and with the right redox signaling that these carbon lignites are bringing into us. And so then we paid them to go and see their Technicolor creations because we weren't having them in our own heads while we slept at night. How's that?
Yeah, well, they commandeered the imagination. There's no doubt about it. I laugh because I see people that, they are drawn to like cartoon characters and superheroes and stuff like that. I was thinking about that earlier today. People that want to think they're Batman, or, they go to the gym and they're all bulked up and they wear Superman shirts. I'm like, dude, Superman's not real. But people want to associate with that. That's kind of their world. The whole world is kind of make believe, and it's a fantasy world. It's a cartoon world. I don't know. I think about that sometimes. You might think I'm weird for thinking like that, but I do think like that.
No, that's why you're called a sage of Quay, because you are a sage. But that was very well put, what you said a minute or two ago. They've commandeered the imagination, and our imagination is extremely active. And I'm going to say this again. If the orator that you feel consciously, because of the order that you're getting on the cellular level, if that translates into a more stable, happy mindset, then what if the quality and the range and the creativity in your dreams translates into your own expressed creativity during the day, the creativity that you can commandeer, to use your word, yourself, that latent stuff that's been buried deep by all this artifice around us, the artificial entertainment that we have. If you can take the entertainment that you create within a 5-minute dream or a 10-minute dream that you have in the early morning because you're taking Restore, and that can be flipped into, parlayed into something that you generate in your daytime life that's creative and wondrous and in super color, because these dreams are so vivid. So what I'm trying to say is, if that vividness can translate into something you create in your own life, what about that? These are the kinds of things I'm noticing now. And you have to be on this stuff for a little while. This is my 4th month. But my gosh, you cannot buy changes like that in your life.
No, and the problem is most people just don't believe those types of changes can actually take place. You know, it's a whole mindset that folks have that these types of benefits can't possibly exist. And they turn around, they say, because if it did exist, my doctor would tell me about it. That's the answer you would get, right?
Well, not every doctor knows everything. I mean, I heard from Mercola the other day that something like 50% of dentists are no longer using amalgam fillings, which are very misleadingly called silver fillings. And then people are proud because they think they have silver in their mouth, because they used to have gold in their mouth, remember?
Yeah. But
it used to be something like 3% of dentists were eschewing the amalgam mercury containing fillings. And now 50%? That's pretty good. Half?
Yeah, that is pretty good.
So one day, maybe doctors will be much more informed and they'll be giving us way better information. I'm not holding my breath, but you know, Ray Kurzweil can dream about his nanobots, but in the meantime, we still have time, and we have things like Restore and magnesium and iodine and our own dreams and our friendships and these shows. So thank you, Mike, for the opportunity to let me on and let me loose, as you have.
It was a great conversation, Sophia. It really was. I had a lot of fun. We covered a lot of areas and very thought-provoking, especially about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. I'm going to suggest to everybody that you watch the Richard Hall and Andrew Johnson expose. I'll put the links in the description box below, and you can take a look for yourself. We covered it, and I think we did a good job, but they really get into some greater detail, so I think you'll find that of interest. And the whole thing on artificial intelligence versus augmented intelligence, Sophia, is really, really thought-provoking. You know, when you explain it and then you take a step back and you think about it, that's where it's going. So I want to thank you again for coming on, and as you know, and you know this already, that you come back anytime, you have an open invitation, and we'll discuss all kinds of things.
We have much more to discuss, but the fact is I can't come back anytime, Mike, because I have to be scheduled.
You have to be scheduled? What, by me?
Yes.
Folks, this is how the scheduling works. Mike, we have to do another show. Okay, I'll get you some dates. It's not that hard. She's making me sound like an ogre.
I'm telling you. Okay, well, everybody, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's bought Restore, and do write to me and tell me what you think of it. And I do have the bulk pricing now. You just go to my website, avatarproducts.com, and use the contact form or support@avatarproducts.com, and I'll give you some other prices, bulk prices. And Mike, you will have your special pricing too.
Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate that. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.